What's up, everybody? Welcome to my channel. Today I'm gonna be working on this 2012. This is a Scion XB and it has a 2AZ motor. I'm gonna be swapping the motor because the one it has a misfire. I have not checked the motor to see what's wrong with it. I will check it because I'm curious, but regardless, I still want to swap the engines because this is a Japanese engine and the American ones are known to consume oil. So I'm gonna go ahead and swap it regardless, even if I find a problem and it's fixable. I'm gonna start with the motor. I'm gonna go ahead and take all the accessories off because even if I reuse them, it's a lot easier just to drop the engine in without any accessories. And I'm also gonna be replacing a couple of gaskets and seals. As a matter of fact, I only wanna do the front seal for the crankshaft. This is the rear main. This one's really important to replace. And I'm gonna be replacing the valve cover gasket. These are the most common ones to leak. So you wanna replace them, especially this one, because once you drop the engine in, if the old one leaks, you're gonna have to either pull out the motor again or the transmission. I'm gonna remove pretty much everything. I'm gonna remove the old harness, the coils, the intake, all the hoses, the vacuum hoses, the throttle body, the alternator. For the water pump, I think I'm only gonna do the pulley. I might do the whole water pump too, I'm not sure. I'm also gonna remove the tensioner for the belt, the pulley, and the power steering pump, which this one doesn't have a power steering pump. So it's just an idler pulley. I'm gonna go ahead and remove everything. I'm just gonna put it on the side. I'm not gonna record the process because I don't wanna make this video too long, but I'm gonna show you guys once the engine is ready. I pretty much removed everything already. Here's all my accessories. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove the valve cover. I wanna see how it looks inside. Okay, it actually looks pretty clean. So that's a good thing. It looks like they were doing their oil changes. I did find two things that I didn't like on the motor. So first of all, the pulley is broken. You're able to see that it has a big old crack and a piece is about to fall off. So that's not a good thing. It looks like they were beating on the pulley. And then there's another piece over here missing. The other thing I didn't like, so this water port right here, it's loose and you're actually able to take it off. See, so this is not a good thing. I'm gonna have to use another one, probably the one from the car. I'm gonna have to reuse the one from the other motor. And that's one of the reasons why I like to take everything apart. Because as you take it apart, you find things that are wrong with the motor. And things like this, it's a lot easier to fix outside of the car than once the motor is inside. I'm gonna go ahead and check everything else, but I'm pretty much ready to install my seal. So I'm gonna install the front seal, the valve cover gasket, and I'm gonna go ahead and install my rear main. Then once the motor is ready, I'm gonna move to the car. Here's my two seals. So this is the front seal, the rear main, and then this is the valve cover gasket. And honestly, they're not that bad. They're still soft. So all the gaskets are soft like they should be. But I'm gonna go ahead and install those right now. Once I install those, the motor is gonna be pretty much ready to drop it in. I was about to install the valve cover and I was taking another look at the head. And honestly, I mean, it's way too clean. And it looks like if they clean it with a steam cleaner, there is like some burnt oil sludge. So inside of the caps, all of the caps, they have like oil sludge. You're able to see it right here, like inside of the caps, like this one. I mean, all of them, they all have oil sludge. And another thing I noticed, so in one of the head bolts, there's like water mixed with oil. And I think it's due because they probably washed the engine. So there's nothing I can do about it. I'm not gonna open the whole motor to inspect it. I'm just gonna hope that this is a good engine. I'm gonna finish installing the seals and the gasket, and I'm gonna hope for the best. But it's a Toyota engine, so it should be a good engine. I'm pretty much done with the motor. It's ready to drop in. Now I'm gonna work on the car. So I'm gonna take a look. Let me put this on real quick. I'm gonna take it apart, but before I take it apart, I wanna see what's wrong with it. So I'm gonna see if I can figure out that misfire. Not that I really care about the engine, but I wanna check the electronics. I wanna check the injector, the coils, and the harness, because I don't wanna install this motor and still have the misfire. So I wanna figure out what's wrong with this motor. And if it's the motor itself, then I'm not gonna worry about the electronics. but if the motor is good, then I gotta figure out what's wrong with it. That way I fix the issue. For example, it could be an injector, a coil, or maybe a pin on one of the connectors. The idea is drop this engine in and have no issues. So let's figure out what's wrong with it. So I hooked up the scanner. I want to read the codes, and so far I have a misfire on cylinder number 1, and it has 3 codes, but all of them are misfire cylinder number 1, misfire cylinder number 1. So I know I have a problem on cylinder number 1. Now I'm gonna go outside and I'm gonna figure out if it's an injector, if it's the coil, or if it's something else like the piston, the rings, the head gasket, or it could even be a valve. So I'm gonna figure out what's going on. Next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna verify that I have a misfire on cylinder number 1. So I'm gonna turn it on and I'm gonna disconnect all the coils, and I'm gonna make sure that the misfire is on cylinder number 1. So there's definitely a misfire on a cylinder. I'm gonna verify that it's number 1. It didn't do anything, stay the same. So I'm gonna go to number 2 now. So number 2, I noticed a change. I'm gonna go to cylinder number 3 now. Okay, there's a change on number 3 as well. And the last one, number 4. There's also a change. The engine is shaking a lot more. So I'm gonna connect back. So I'm gonna connect number 4. So I do have a problem on number 1. Now I'm gonna swap the coils and I'm gonna disconnect them again and see if there's a change. I just swapped the coils, so I'm gonna see if there's any difference when I disconnect the coils. I'm gonna go ahead and do number 2 first. So number 2, there is a difference when I disconnect it. I'm gonna plug it back on. Now I'm gonna do number 1. Number 1 didn't do anything. So I know the problem is not the coil. I'm gonna go ahead and check the injector now. To check the injectors, I have this tool right here by OTC, and all you gotta do is connect it to the battery, positive, negative, and on the other end, you connect it to the injector. So from the old harness, I got a connector, and all you gotta do is press this button right here, and you can hear the injector opening and closing. It has several options. So it has 1 pulse, 50 pulses, and the other one's like 100. So I'm gonna put it on 1, and I'm able to hear it opening and close. Now I'm gonna set it to 50, and this is 100. Okay, so this is an injector from the old motor. Now I'm gonna connect this to the injector on the car, and I'm gonna see if it opens and closes. I have the injector connected. Now I'm gonna test it to see if it opens and closes. Okay, so apparently it's working. I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but at least I know that it's not stuck. The last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna check the spark plug, which I doubt is the spark plug because the owner replaced the spark plugs already, and the compression on the engine. But pretty much as of right now, I'm 100% sure that there's a problem with the motor. I got my compression test connected. So now I'm gonna check the compression on cylinder number 1, and I'm gonna see if there's a problem. So let's see what happens. All right, so the needle's not moving at all. Now I'm gonna go with cylinder number 2 to see if I have compression on number 2. Okay, so I'm gonna check compression on number 2. All right, so there's definitely compression on number 2. I'm not gonna check anything else, I'm done. I'm gonna go ahead and pull out the motor, and we're gonna drop that one in. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start draining the oil, and I'm gonna drain the antifreeze. For the power steering, I think this is electronic. This one doesn't have a power steering. I'm not sure yet, but on that motor, there's no power steering pump. There's only a idle or pulley. So I think this one's gonna have the same thing. I don't see any power steering. So I don't have to worry about the power steering. All I have to worry about is the antifreeze and the engine oil. I'm gonna go ahead and start draining those. I had to remove that plastic cover to drain the antifreeze. So I'm letting the antifreeze and the oil drain. The oil's in there. For the meanwhile, I'm gonna start taking everything apart. I'm gonna start with the battery. I'm gonna disconnect the battery. I'm gonna remove the air filter housing. I'm gonna remove all the air ducts. I'm gonna start removing the exhaust, the accessories, the harness. So I'm not gonna record everything because I don't want to make this video too long. I'm just gonna show you guys the main things you have to remove and how to remove them. But the simple stuff, I'm not gonna go into detail. I already disconnected a couple of things. So the harness is loose. Here's the harness. I removed the air filter housing, the shroud for the exhaust. I disconnected some hoses. So I'm gonna take off the rest of the stuff. I spray some WD-40 on the exhaust so I don't strip anything. And I'm gonna remove the alternator right now and all the accessories I'm able to remove. And I think the intake has to come off. I don't wanna break anything, I don't wanna damage anything. So I'm gonna try to remove as much as I can before I pull the engine out. I'm almost done with the top. All I gotta do is, I'm gonna remove the intake right now. So it has a couple of bolts on the bottom. Actually, it only has 2 bolts on the bottom. I'm gonna take them off in a minute. I already got my exhaust off, my alternator. They're sitting over here, that's the exhaust. And that's the alternator right here. And I already unbolted the compressor. So the compressor is just sitting right here. The other thing I did, I also removed all the bolts on the transmission. So right now I'm gonna go underneath. I'm gonna remove the ones underneath. And I'm gonna see what I have to do underneath the car. But before I do, the harness goes between the engine and the intake. So here's the harness, and it goes in between the intake and the engine. So I'm gonna remove the intake, and that's pretty much it for the top. I got the intake off, but it doesn't fit through here or here. So I'm just gonna let it sit back here. I don't wanna force anything because I don't wanna break anything. So once I pull the motor out, I'm just gonna take it off, check it, clean it, and then I'm gonna throw it back next to the engine bay, and I'm gonna let it sit there. Then I'm gonna drop the engine in, and I'm gonna bolt it back on. Another thing, you got a ground back here. So you gotta disconnect the ground, and the harness, it only has a couple of clips that you gotta undo. And right in the middle, it has a connector. I think it's gonna be the connector for the knock sensor. So you gotta disconnect that, and that's pretty much it. I plan to remove the rest of the accessories on the front, but I'm not gonna do it until I finish disconnecting the bottom, and I'm about ready to pull out the motor. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna bring it up, and I'm just gonna do the bottom. I started working on the bottom and I'm almost done. So I already disconnected all the bolts that hold the transmission to the engine. And I also removed the ones on the flex plate. They're all off. Another thing I have to do, there's a bracket right here for the axle. So I'm gonna remove the bracket and I'm gonna remove the whole axle. I used to unbolt the bracket back in the day, and I would leave the axle in here. But when you pull out the motor and when you drop it in, you struggle a lot more than if you just take it off. It only takes like 10-15 minutes to remove the axle. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove the axle, and that's gonna be it. The next step is gonna be just pulling out the motor. And here's the intake. I'm just gonna leave the intake there. I'm ready to pull out the engine. I did not remove the axle, so I think I'm gonna do it later on. First I wanna pull out the motor. Then I think it's gonna be a little bit easier to remove the axle. I'm gonna try to do it like this, and if I can't, then definitely I will remove the axle. Another thing I have to remove is the motor mount. I got my motor out, so here it is. I left the intake there. I'm gonna take it off right now to clean it and make sure everything's good with it. Then I'm gonna throw it back in here. I'm also gonna remove the axle. So this is like a 2-piece axle, and it's connected to the transmission, obviously. But I mean, it looks pretty good on the outside. I have to open it up and see what happened. I'll probably will open it up, but that's gonna be another video. For now, I'm gonna get everything ready. I gotta swap a couple of things. I'm gonna be using this flex plate because I don't wanna take any chances. I don't wanna use the other flex plate and maybe it's different. So I'm gonna go with this flex plate. I know the thermostat housing is different. I think this is different as well. So I'm gonna swap this out, and I'm gonna probably use these sensors because I don't know if the other ones are broken. Some of them were broken, like the oil pressure, the knock sensor. I think I'm gonna use this knock sensor, and I'm gonna use this idler because the other one, I don't know the condition of it. Anything other than that, I mean, that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna go ahead, put this on the floor, start swapping the parts I need, and I'm gonna drop the other one in. I got the motor out, so what I'm gonna do next, I'm gonna swap everything from this motor to the other motor sitting over there. So a couple of things are different, and I know for a fact that these sensors work because the car will turn on. So I'm gonna use all the sensors, and I'm gonna use all the accessories and some of the brackets. I'm gonna use this insulation right here. And I mean, like I said, all the sensors, and on the other motor, this is damaged. So I'm gonna pull this out. I'm gonna put it on the other motor, the flex plate, and I think that's pretty much it. Another thing, I wanted to remove the axle, but I think I'm gonna give it a try. I'm gonna install the motor without removing the axle, but if it gives me a hard time, then I'm definitely gonna remove the axle. I already swapped the accessories I wanna use from this one to this one. Got my flex plate on, a couple of sensors, so I'm gonna go ahead and drop it in. I got the motor in, and believe me, I tried to drop the engine in with the axle, and it didn't work. So I had to remove the axle. The axle is sitting right here. So if you guys ever do a car like this, first thing you do, remove that axle, because you might be able to pull out the motor, but once you gotta drop it in, you're gonna have a hard time. Just play it safe and remove whatever you have to remove. Don't do any shortcuts, because honestly, sometimes they don't work. Now I'm gonna bolt everything back on. I gotta put all my accessories back, my motor mount. I got the intake over there, the exhaust, the alternator. So I'm just gonna start bolting everything back on. I already put everything back. I'm almost done. I just gotta put a couple of things on this side, just the air filter housing. And on this side, I'm missing a motor mount. I haven't put it on yet because I wanna put the serpentine belt. The only problem is that the belt didn't fit anymore. So apparently this is a 2.0 instead of a 2.4. I pulled out a 2.4 and this is a 2.0. So the water pump housing, it's different. It pushes the alternator back a little bit more and the belt doesn't fit no more. So I already got another one for it. I'm gonna see if it fits. If it does, then I'm gonna put the motor mount and I'm gonna put everything back on the car. But I'm pretty much done. I just finished putting everything back. So I already installed my axle, and believe me, next time I do another car like this, the first thing I'm gonna do is remove that axle. It only takes like 5 minutes and it makes your life a lot easier. I already put my exhaust, my flex plate, bolted down the transmission, and that's pretty much it. A couple of sensors on the back, like the oxygen sensor, and I mean, I think it was a ground, I don't remember. I don't really remember, but I double check everything, it's bolted back on. So I'm pretty much done underneath. All I gotta do, I also replaced the oil filter. So all I gotta do is just put the cover that goes right here and another cover that goes here, and I'm pretty much done. But before I do that, I wanna put that belt on. So I still gotta put the belt, and I gotta install the motor mount, and that's it. I'm done. I could crank it and see if it starts, but I'm gonna wait for the belt. I'm gonna go get another one. I think I'm having a hard time finding the right one because the engine is a little different. I mean, I can't find anything online, but I'll eventually find the right belt. So I'm gonna go ahead, bring it down, go get that belt, and just finish it. I finally got the right belt. I bought 2 of them and they didn't fit. I went online and people were suggesting to use this one. So this is the part number, the 7PK1935, and this one fits. So the problem I was having is the block, it's a little bit different on the water pump. This one's like extended. It has a water pump housing. So I believe this is like a 2.0 motor. And let me show you guys the other one. This one over here, this is a 2.4, and this one doesn't have a bolt-on housing. So the alternator, it's a little bit more towards the block. And on the other engine, the alternator, it's away from the block. So you'll need a bigger belt. I'm gonna go ahead and finish this. All I gotta do is just connect this piece of harness, put my motor mount back on, and that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna finish it, I'm gonna turn it on, and hopefully I have no problems. Okay, I'm pretty much done with the car. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it on right now. I'm gonna let it idle. I already added the antifreeze. I'm gonna make sure the fans turn on. I'm gonna make sure it doesn't overheat. I already cranked it a couple of times with the coils disconnected because I don't want the engine to start with no oil, and since the motor was sitting for a while and I replaced the oil filter, I definitely don't want the engine to start dry. So I already cranked it a couple of times, but right now I'm gonna turn the ignition switch on and off, so I can build fuel pressure. Then I'm gonna turn it on and I'm gonna make sure everything's good. So I'm just gonna cycle the key to build fuel pressure. That should be enough. I'm gonna go ahead and start it now. And it started right up. It didn't make any noise because I already built the oil pressure. So let's go outside. It sounds okay. It doesn't have a misfire. Now I'm gonna let it warm up. I'm gonna see if it bleeds all the air out of the system. I gotta make sure the fans turn on. All right, so that's pretty much it. All I gotta wait is for the fans to turn on. Once the fans turn on, I'm gonna take it outside and drive it, make sure everything's good. But that's gonna be it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.